All right, so stay with me on this. I know this is gonna be a little bit weird, and I know that malls are a dying breed, okay? But if you think about it, they're actually pretty fascinating. Not only are they great for people watching, but they're also a great place to go and see a diverse amount of brands represented. Like, you can walk in and find all kinds of different stores side by side next to each other, and they're all in one building. You just walk down, and if you think about it, it's kind of cool. There's not really many other places you can go that have that kind of culture. And no matter where you go, every environment has its own vibe. And that's especially noticeable when you're in a place like a mall. And so when you go there, and maybe you don't think about stores as having their own vibes or whatever, maybe you do think about that, and that's why you choose certain stores. But every store has its own vibe or brand or reputation that they want you to be thinking about when you think about them. Think about it. I mean, you got American Eagle, Hollister, PacSun, H&M, all stores that sell pretty much the exact same thing to the same age groups of people, but every one of those stores has a very distinct personality to it, its own vibe, its own brand recognition. And that's not by accident. In fact, you go into a Starbucks even, and like I'm in a Starbucks, but you get what I'm saying. You go in and you can tell exactly where you're at because of the environment. And that is no mistake. Brands pay a ton of money, billions of dollars every year, establishing their brand recognition. They want people to associate whatever you want them to think about with their brand. And they pay money for you to be able to notice those things. Think about it. I'm gonna give you a few examples of some reputations, and I want you to list in the comments the brand that I'm talking about, okay? Here's the first one. 2 days or less, lightning fast shipping. Who am I referring to? Put it in the comments. Number 2, lowest prices, always. All right, number 3, the best phones. Now stay with me, I know I'm gonna get some pushback on this, but think the most universal, best for people who don't know how to build their own apps, phones. Number 4, free music streaming. And number 5, best chicken sandwiches anywhere, ever. All right, were you able to recognize which brand each of those reputations represented? First one was Amazon. Second one was Walmart. Third one was, of course, iPhone. Fourth one was Spotify. And fifth one, I'm not even gonna say it because you know it. It's Chick-fil-A. Here's my point. Companies hire hundreds of people and spend billions of dollars to make sure that you recognize what their brand is. Recognize what they're known for. They're known for the things, oftentimes because they are really good at those things, but oftentimes you know brands because of what they've paid for you to know about them. Here's my point when I'm talking about all this, is you and I all have reputations that are made up of something that everybody thinks about when they think about us. And those reputations bring about assumptions. So here's where I'm going with all this. All of us have our own reputations, like these brands, that are made up of something, and people make assumptions based off of our reputations. Just think about the various groups within your own school. Most of you probably have nicknames or things that you think about or associate when you think about certain groups of people. We have assumptions like rich kids are fill in the blank. The white, black, Hispanic, Asian kids are. The people who are TikTok famous are. The AP honors students are. The athletes or the cheerleaders are. Or people who are really into band are. Kids who vape are. And even though we don't say it out loud, or at least probably shouldn't, we all have had assumptions about different groups of people or different associations that we make when we think about certain people. We tend to fill in the blanks about those people, about what they're going to do or what they will be like or how they'll respond to a given situation based off of our assumptions of them. In short, we come to expect certain things from certain people, whether that's fair or not. And this isn't a teenager thing, this is a human experience thing. Everybody deals with this, just like pretty much everything else we've been talking about in this series so far. So I think a fair question is, where do these assumptions come from? I think there's 2 primary places that these assumptions come from and where we kind of take our cues from when we think about different groups of people. The first thing is our own experience. Maybe our own experience with somebody or a group of somebody's has taught us how to think about those people. And so while not everybody fits into a stereotype, sometimes we generalize people just because it's easy for our minds to filter people through that lens. And so we just kind of make assumptions off of people based on experiences that we've had with people. Some of those are good, some of those are bad, but none of them are necessarily fair. I think the second place that we form these assumptions are from our own insecurities at times. Oftentimes we find justification for being upset at somebody or a group of somebody's based upon sometimes it's a jealousy we have, sometimes it's something that we just wish that we had ourselves, or that we were at a certain point, or when maybe we think we've worked hard enough for something, and so we blame certain people for having something that we believe we deserve. And so sometimes our own insecurities actually lead us to assumptions that are just not true. But here's the reality. Our own limited experience in insecurities tend to allow us to fill in the blanks about people way more than we realize we're actually doing. And this can be a real problem if you want to be known for love rather than hate. Because if we're being honest, when we fill in the blanks with something, it's usually not the nicest thing. We usually make assumptions that are not for the better. And the ironic part is we absolutely hate it when other people do it to us. So how do we kind of identify our own gaps and our own assumptions, and how do we treat people with love in the way that we view them, the way that we wish people would do about us? Now, there's a moment that is in Jesus' life and his ministry that I think is really insightful when it comes to this topic. If you've been around church for very long, even actually in our own student areas, we've talked through this passage within the last couple of years. And I bring it up again because it's so important, because it speaks to so many different levels of truth that we all deal with on a daily basis. But if we're not careful, we can forget about these things and let it slide. And it actually affects the way that we are able to love the people that are around us. And it's important to keep this moment in Jesus' life and his ministry in mind in a lot of areas of life, but especially when it comes to being people that are all about love. Because let's be honest, we all struggle with this way more than we would care to admit. So let me give you the backstory. Jesus has been carrying out his ministry, and the religious leaders and the Pharisees, they don't like it because he's actually associating with people that they call, sinners or tax collectors. They're people that have chosen lifestyles or decisions that would place them outside of being fully committed to God. People who have done things that have damaged their reputations, or who have acted in ways that have in some way made them less Christian. That wasn't a term back in this time, but less of a good Jew or a God follower. And Jesus didn't care about that kind of stuff. He actually loved people no matter what they had done or what they had been through. And so the Pharisees, when they started to see that Jesus was getting the attention for this kind of thing, they got upset because hey, we're the ones who, in their eyes, were the righteous ones, the ones who had been doing all the right things, checking all the right boxes, and they're supposed to be the ones that let people know when they need to change. They're supposed to be the ones that let people know who they're supposed to associate with, who's clean, who's unclean. And Jesus comes and he seems to wreck all of that and wreck people's misconceptions and their prejudices about one another. And because this made the Pharisees so upset, they were always trying to come up with ways to trap Jesus and try to disprove his authority and try to make him look like an idiot in front of everybody else, to discredit him, so that they would stop following him and go back to the status quo of following what the Pharisees thought was best. And so in one of these situations where they're trying to catch Jesus in a trap, they find a woman who the text says was caught in the very act of an R-rated situation. And it's not like she was accused of it, she was caught in the act of it. And so they bring her out and set her in front of Jesus and begin to lay this trap for him. And here's what the text says that they said. As he was speaking, Jesus, the teachers of the religious law and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They put her in front of the crowd. Teacher, they said to Jesus, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. Now, the law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say? They were trying to trap him into saying something that they could use against him. So don't miss this. This is a lose-lose situation for Jesus, because if he says, yes, stone her, according to the law of Moses, she's been caught in the act of adultery, she needs to be thrown into a pit and pelted with rocks until she dies. It's a very brutal and ugly business, but this was the custom. If Jesus said that, then he would lose in the eyes of the people because he was known for his love and his grace and his mercy and forgiving people and all this kind of stuff. And he was claiming to have the authority to do so because only God can forgive sins. So he was basically claiming to be God when he was saying those things. So if he, again, sides with the Pharisees and says, yes, stone her just like the law, then he loses in the eyes of the people for being someone who's not loving. At the same time, if he says, no, she can't be stoned, let's give her mercy and grace and all this stuff, he says this, then it gives the Pharisees the ability to say, see, he's not from God because he's not upholding the law of Moses that was given to us by God generations ago. Either way, it's a lose-lose situation for Jesus, and they seem to have set the perfect trap for him, but look and see how he actually responds. But Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. They kept demanding an answer, so he stood up again and said, all right, but let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone. Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. When the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you? No, Lord, she said. And Jesus said, neither do I. Go and sin no more. This would have been the perfect, mic drop moment. Peace out. And Jesus basically, he springs the trap and gets out of it, and the Pharisees look like idiots. They look uncompassionate, and it put Jesus actually even better in the eyes of the people because he didn't go with any of the two answers that the Pharisees seemed to leave him with. Jesus basically points out, hey, you're pretty quick to point out what other people have done wrong, but what about you? What have you gotten wrong? He kind of turns the tables a little bit on them. And then one by one, starting with oldest, I like how the text specifies that. They start to back away and leave, and because they know that the older and wiser they are, they know, well, I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes and I've done things wrong. He has us. Game over. And they leave. Don't miss this. Everybody was guilty of something, and Jesus had a message for both of them. What is possible for your future is not determined by your past. Not if you're a Pharisee and not if you're the woman. Both are guilty and both are free to go. Both had a reputation for something, and both were able to walk away seeing things a little bit differently than they came. Jesus challenged the woman. Notice this, he doesn't leave her off the hook. Often that's where we like to stop in Christianity in our culture today, is to say, see, Jesus loves me, and he says, that I'm forgiven, and all this kind of stuff, and nobody should judge anyone else because everybody sinned. But that's not where he leaves the woman. He says, go and sin no more. He says, you can take that grace, you can take that forgiveness, and you can turn it into something better for your life. And you can follow God and more accurately reflect his love through the love that you're able to provide because of the love that God has given to you. And isn't that our mandate as Christians, to go and love everybody else, love others as Christ has loved us? That doesn't mean, like we talked about last week, letting people off the hook. It also doesn't mean we let ourselves off the hook. It means that we go and sin no more. We live differently. Our perspectives are changed forever because of the love of Jesus in our lives. And that's ultimately what we want our lives to be about, is our love for others in the same way. Love that changes and not condemns. Jesus' very approach to this situation teaches us that all of our reputations, whether they are good or bad or whatever, based on something that we've done or a people group that we associate ourselves with, no matter what has happened in our past, it does not have to define our future. And Jesus proved that we are more than the assumptions that other people will make about us. We are worthy of second chances, of his grace, because of his love for us, and that should change us. And we can extend that same love and grace and forgiveness to others as well. Ultimately, here's the bottom line of this week's message, is that when you're tempted to fill in the blanks about somebody, when you're tempted to make assumptions about somebody based off of something that they've said or done, I want you to let love fill in those blanks. Don't fill in those blanks with the things that you could, the plethora of bad things that you've seen in people or people like that or whatever. Allow love to be your filter and to fill in the blanks with the way that you view people. This would change the way that we all interact with one another, wouldn't it? Because instead of seeing each other and expecting the worst from each other, we would be seeing each other not through the lens of judgment or hate, but through the lens of love and through the way that Jesus actually sees us. So when the opportunities for judgments and assumptions start flying at you, I want you to do a couple of things. First is to stop and think about the way that others have made judgment calls about you and have filled in the blanks about your reputation. When you make an assumption about what somebody else will do or say or who they are, stop. Think about whether or not you want people to measure you by those same standards. Remember how people have judged you and how that felt. Remember what it feels like to not be given the benefit of the doubt. Remember what it feels like to just be misunderstood because of some mistake you've done or because of something else that has happened in your past. You don't like that when it happens to you, and you feel like it's unfair when people treat you a certain way because of that. So stop and think about the way people have filled in the blanks for you, and don't be somebody who perpetuates that problem in somebody else's life. Secondly, I want you to remind yourself and remember the different ways that you filled in the blanks about somebody else. Now this is tough, and this is the last thing that we want to do when we are thinking about these kind of things and processing this. But I can think of several situations in my own life where I filled in the blanks about somebody, and it really made the situation worse, either because I spread something about somebody else unintentionally or intentionally, or because I just treated them with disrespect and almost like they were less than me because of a blank that I had filled about somebody else that maybe, even if it was accurate, was not fair for me to treat them that way. It's not the way Jesus has treated me, and it's not the way that Jesus treated you. Jesus died for everybody to forgive the sins of everyone. And so everybody, when you see them, should be through that lens of love and sacrifice. Let love fill in the blanks for what you think about somebody and what you expect the future to hold for them. And here's where it gets even more personal. We all need to ease up on our own assumptions, because we all, especially if we're in church, have to be willing and ready to admit that maybe we have been part of that issue. Maybe we have been a stumbling block for somebody who is trying to genuinely seek out God, because we don't live our lives with a reputation of love. Maybe you wouldn't call it hate, but it's certainly not love, the way that you talk about other people, the way that you make assumptions about other people or other teachers or coaches, whatever it is. And when it comes to church and church people, this is especially important for getting this right, especially when we're in a time that is as vulnerable as this, when we're in the middle of a pandemic and we're trying to get back to a sense of normalcy. The way that we respond to people when we come back together can speak dividends for the love of God. Maybe you tend to assume they don't belong here, I don't belong here, they'll never change. People like that, or people like me, always or never. Fill in the blank. But here's the thing, my friends, statements like that take the Christ out of Christianity. It makes our faith about things that God has not made our faith about, and it wreaks havoc on the lives of others. Many people, maybe you know them, have turned away from the faith and turned away from God altogether because of the reputation of a few who call themselves Christians. You have the opportunity to change that mindset and change that reputation when it comes to the way that other people think and see Christians. There is always hope for change. When we choose to follow Jesus' example and let love fill in the blanks, we are choosing to be Christ to everybody else, to allow other people to feel the same grace and love that the woman felt who was in front of Jesus. We can be a people who let love fill in the blank about others. We can give people the benefit of the doubt, and we can help people know what it's like to walk with Jesus and to have a true relationship with God. When we do this, we will be a people that are known for our love of others, not for our hate, not for what we're against, but by our love. I hope you guys have enjoyed this series. I hope it's been really helpful and beneficial for you in not only changing your perspective and your mindset when it comes to your walk with God, but I hope that it has also challenged you and given you some next steps that you can take when it comes to your faith journey. Guys, we are coming down to the wire. Just 2 weeks from now, we will be able to meet in person again. So a couple things I want to say about that before I let you go is, first off, I don't want you to feel uncomfortable or feel obligated to do anything that you're not ready to commit to yet. So if your parents or if your family are not comfortable yet coming into a public setting like church, that's perfectly fine. Our lessons will still be recorded and uploaded the same as they always have, and you'll have an opportunity to be able to connect with us throughout the week as well. But at the same time, I would encourage you, if your family is comfortable with it, feel free to come back. We will have a whole lot of safety things in place to make sure everybody feels comfortable, but we will be meeting together and we will be able to actually have relationships with each other in person again in ways that we have not been able to for the last several months. So I, for one, am looking forward to it. I hope you can join us, and if not, again, that's perfectly fine. We'll still be able to connect online and be able to relate with one another that way. So until next time, I love you guys, hope you're doing well, and we'll catch you next week.